Kyrie to Chronicles of Ancient Greece, the podcast that delves deep into the fascinating history, myths, and legacies of the ancient Greek world. This is episode 15, Oh My Gods. Well, first of all, Happy New Year to all of you out there. I hope 2026 started well and that you are on track to keep your resolutions at least until March. Personally, I have a feeling it's going to be a good year in spite of everything that is happening in the world right now. Let's just ignore the chaos and wars in our world and jump right into the creative mess that are the Olympian gods of ancient Greece. Before we can talk about the Olympian gods as a coherent group, though, we need to dispense with a very persistent misunderstanding, namely that the Greek gods sprang fully formed from some unified belief system neatly arranged atop Mount Olympus like a well-organized celestial committee. I'm sure you're already aware that they did in fact not do that. The gods of ancient Greece evolved slowly and unevenly from local cults, regional deities, borrowed foreign gods, and older mythic traditions, many of which predated anything we would recognize as Greek religion. Early Greek worship was intensely local. A god worshipped in one valley might be unknown 2 valleys over, and the same god might actually behave very differently depending on where you met them. Over time, though, through trade, migration, conquest, and storytelling, these local figures were merged, reinterpreted, standardized, and occasionally domesticated into something resembling a shared pantheon. Epic poetry, especially Homer and Hesiod, did a tremendous amount of heavy lifting here, not by inventing the gods outright, but by giving them a shared genealogy, shared personalities, and shared conflict. And crucially, the worldview underlying all of this was not a comforting one. The Greeks believed the universe was ordered, governed by rules, patterns, and cosmic hierarchies, but they also believed it was profoundly unfair. Bad things happen to good people. Power rarely aligned with justice. Intelligence mattered more than virtue, and survival often depended on knowing when to bend rather than when to stand firm. Not surprisingly, their gods reflect this. They are not moral exemplars. They are explanations for how power behaves. They embody forces that shaped human life: marriage, war, desire, intelligence, nature, and they behave the way those forces behave. Inconsistently, often cruelly, and with little regard for human happiness. In other words, they behaved almost human. So, with that in mind, today we're going to look at 6 Olympians: Hera, Athena, Apollo, Artemis, Ares, and Aphrodite. We're setting Zeus aside for now, partly because he dominates every story he appears in, and partly because understanding everyone else first makes Zeus make a lot more sense later. So, 6 today, 6 next week, and then a standalone episode for the OG bearded one. Here we go. We'll begin with Hera, queen of the gods, goddess of marriage, childbirth, and legitimate succession, and the divine embodiment of institutional stability. Hera is among the oldest Olympians in terms of worship. Archaeological and literary evidence suggests she was revered long before Zeus became the uncontested king of the gods. In several regions, especially in Argos, Hera appears to have been the primary deity, not a subordinate consort. The later mythological marriage between Hera and Zeus likely reflects a political and religious merger. An older, locally powerful goddess integrated into a newer pan-Hellenic hierarchy. And that background actually matters because it explains Hera's role far better than the popular caricature of her as simply the jealous wife. Because Hera, as you have noted, is not the goddess of romantic love. She is the goddess of marriage as a social institution. Contracts, legitimacy, lineage, and continuity. Her concern is not happiness. It's stability. Which also is why her myths play out the way that they do. Because when Zeus cheats, and I'm not sure if you've heard this before, he does do that quite a lot. Hera almost never punishes Zeus directly. She does on occasion, but usually she targets his lovers and their children. We'll get to the stories more when we get to Zeus, but suffice it to say right now that Io is transformed and tormented, Semele is destroyed, Heracles is hounded for his entire life. To modern audiences, this might feel grotesquely unjust. To the Greeks, though, it reflected a harsh social reality. Institutions persist even when individuals abuse them, and the costs of that abuse are rarely paid by the most powerful person involved. In the end, Hera enforces the rules because someone has to. The fact that the rules themselves are cruel is not her concern. And in that sense, Hera is actually one of the most unsettling gods in the pantheon. Not because she is evil or anything, but because she is right, at least according to the logic of the system she represents, whatever we may think of it today. So, if Hera represents institutional order, Athena represents competence within that order. According to Hesiod's Theogony, Athena was a child of Zeus and the Titaness Metis. In Hesiod's Theogony, Zeus lusts after Metis, but she does not want him at all. She tries to escape, she changes her form. Zeus does not care, obviously. I mean, he's Zeus. And he's so determined that in the end she relents. And once she's pregnant, though, the oracle of Gaia prophesizes that while Metis' first child will be a girl, her second child would be a boy that would then overthrow Zeus. Now, Zeus, no stranger to son overthrowing father prophecies, takes this warning to heart. But instead of just banishing Metis or, not having any more children with her, he does the logical thing and swallows her. Yes, he swallows her, just like his father Kronos had done with his children. Now, Metis at this time was pregnant with Athena, and apparently she's still pregnant with Athena inside of Zeus, who after a while apparently develops the mother of all headaches, which, yeah, okay, I get that. It attracts the other gods who come to see what the problem is, and Hermes realizes what needs to be done, and he directs Hephaestus to take a wedge and split open Zeus's skull. Once again, the Greek gods were not known for their subtlety. Out of Zeus's skull now springs Athena, fully grown and in a full set of armor. I cannot stress enough how badass I think this origin myth is. Now, you would not necessarily think it, but the Greeks actually saw Athena not born of a mother, but of intellect, because she emerges from Zeus's head. Athena bypasses reproduction entirely and emerges as a finished product, rational, disciplined, and aligned with authority from the moment she arrives. In the Greek pantheon, Athena governs warfare, but only a specific kind. Strategy, planning, restraint, and coordination. She has no patience at all for chaos or emotional violence. That's Ares' department. Athena's war is about outcomes, not glory. She is also the goddess of crafts, especially weaving, and of civic institutions. Cities are her domain, laws are her tools, and heroes who succeed through cleverness, Odysseus foremost among them, are her favorites. But, once again, her intelligence is not neutral. She consistently supports existing hierarchies. She sides with Zeus in every major divine conflict. In the Oresteia, she resolves a cycle of blood vengeance, not by abolishing violence, but by transferring authority from family retaliation to state-controlled justice. So we're only two gods, or rather goddesses in, but you see a pattern emerging here. The gods represent stability. They tell the Greeks that order is better than chaos. They represent the belief that intelligence, in the case of Athena, should serve order and not challenge it. Basically, protect the system at all costs. Athena does reward ingenuity, but she punishes those who use skill to defy the gods or upset social balance, as Arachne learns when her superior weaving becomes an act of hubris. To the Greeks, wisdom was not about questioning power. It was rather about navigating it successfully. And god number 3 just adds on to that, because if Athena is intelligence in action, Apollo is order made manifest. Apollo is a late arrival to the Greek pantheon, likely imported and reshaped from Eastern Mediterranean traditions. But once he arrives, he becomes indispensable. He is the god of light, music, healing, prophecy, archery, and plague. An unsettling list until you realize that all of these involve precision and control. Apollo's defining trait is clarity. He sees things as they are. His prophecies are true. His aim never falters. His music follows mathematical proportion. And that exactly is why Apollo is terrifying. He does not bend. When mortals offend him, he responds instantly and decisively. Niobe boasts of her children and loses them all. Marsyas challenges him musically and is flayed alive. When Apollo sends plagues, he does so not out of malice, but because balance has been violated. The Delphic oracle encapsulates this perfectly. Apollo speaks the truth, but he does not explain it. If the humans misunderstand, that is their problem, plain and simple. So, to the Greeks, Apollo represented a universe that made sense, but did not care whether that sense aligned with human well-being. Order exists, justice is optional. It's no wonder that Apollo was the favorite god of our dear old friend Gaius Octavius, aka Octavian, aka Augustus, who, if anything, valued a good and stable social order. So, from the light of Apollo, we move into the wilderness with Artemis. Artemis governs the hunt, wild animals, untamed landscapes, and virginity. Not in a sexual sense, but as autonomy. She exists outside marriage, outside cities, and often outside sympathy. Her myths are strikingly consistent. Artemis establishes boundaries, physical, social, bodily, and when those boundaries are crossed, punishment is immediate and absolute. There is no warning, no negotiation, and no proportional response. Actaeon sees her bathing and dies. Agamemnon offends her pride and must sacrifice his daughter to keep his fleet moving towards Troy. Artemis protects young women on one hand, but she also threatens them. She presides over childbirth, but she also brings sudden death. She embodies nature as the Greeks experienced it: beautiful, necessary, and utterly indifferent. Interestingly enough, modern audiences often read Artemis as a proto-feminist icon, and there is truth in that, because she represents a life outside patriarchal structures. The Greeks, though, understood the cost of that freedom, because to live beyond society in ancient Greece was to live without mercy. And speaking of no mercy, our next god is Ares. Ares is war in its rawest form: noise, blood, rage, and confusion. He has no interest in strategy, justice, or outcomes. He exists entirely in the moment of violence. And, no surprise here, almost no one likes him. Zeus despises him, Athena defeats him, mortals fear him but do not admire him, and even his victories are hollows. This is not by accident. The Greeks may have been a militarized society, but they were not naive about war. And so, Ares represents the truth they preferred not to dwell on: that violence is often stupid, self-perpetuating, and emotionally driven. Unlike Athena, Ares does not build civilizations, he destroys them, which is why he exists, not as a hero, but as a reminder. And finally today, we come to Aphrodite, perhaps the most dangerous goddess of them all. Aphrodite's origins lie in Near Eastern fertility cults, and her mythic birth from sea foam following an act of divine mutilation that we've already talked about, namely Gaia cutting off Uranus's testicles with a sickle, signals immediately that she is not safe. Aphrodite governs love, beauty, attraction, and sexual desire. But in Greek myth as today, these are not gentle forces. They override reason, disrupt families, and start wars. The Trojan War begins because Aphrodite promises Paris the most beautiful woman in the world. This is not framed as villainy. It is framed as inevitability. Aphrodite humiliates gods, manipulates mortals, and makes intelligent people behave catastrophically. She does not punish out of spite. She simply exerts her power and consequences follow. Because to the Greeks, love was not redemptive, it was destabilizing. Which is why Aphrodite is both worshipped and feared. No one escapes her, not even Zeus, and that is precisely the point. Okay, so now that we've met about half the gods, we can finally exist why in the world they exist at all. Because they genuinely do not sound nice. But there obviously is a sense in their existence, and at the most obvious level, they are explanations. That's the doorway. Ancient people confronted with a messy world, birth and death, harvest and blight, violent neighbors, sudden illnesses, love affairs that toppled households, and they made personified stories to make sense of it. But explanation, of course, is only the beginning. Once you look beneath the surface, the gods become a remarkably efficient social technology. They explain, sure, but they also organize, discipline, legitimize, and absorb contradictions that would otherwise tear social life apart. Because humans, in essence, are pattern-seeking, agency-detecting animals. We are terrible at accepting random noise, and we prefer intentional causes even where none exist. Give a thunderclap an agent, and suddenly misfortune has a face. Give a loved one unanticipated attraction, and it becomes a story with motive and consequence. Personifying the forces of nature makes them narratively manageable. A plague is now no longer an abstract catastrophe, it's just Apollo being displeased. And displeasure can be negotiated through sacrifices, supplication, and apologies. It also helps to accept it, because, well, it was done by a god, and who are you to try and mess with the gods? So just accept this plague, move on, and be better next time. This cognitive economy matters. Narrative minds can plan responses, remember agreements, and transmit cultural lessons across generations. The Olympians consist of a memorable cast that lets people think about the world in terms of motives and consequences, which is far more actionable than, well, bad luck. The gods also map naturally onto social institutions. Hera stands for marriage, lineage, and legitimate succession. Athena embodies civic order, law, and craft. Artemis marks rites of passage and the boundary between childhood and adult social roles. Ares externalizes uncontrolled violence, something the state wants to contain. Aphrodite personifies sex and alliances that do not fit neatly into kinship rules. By embedding these institutions within divine narratives, Greek society could both venerate and critique them without destabilizing them outright. Myths are a safety valve. They allow the community to register injustices, Hera's grievances, Athena's pragmatic punishments, while still keeping the institutions intact. In short, gods make social norms feel inevitable, and inevitability is a very good way to keep a complex, fragile society functioning. Also, political elites used these narratives as tools of legitimation. Founding myths, patron deities, and heroic genealogies tie ruling families and city constitutions to divine favor. Athena's centrality in Athens is not just religious preference, it's civic ideology. Calling your city the goddess's favored place gives your legal system cosmic backing. Apollo's oracular authority at Delphi could be invoked to justify colonization plans, settle disputes between polis, or provide retrospective validation for decisions that might otherwise look opportunistic. To put it bluntly, the gods are very useful PR for rulers who want to say, "We did this because the gods commanded it," which tends to shut down dissent. It's a strategy that has actually been used ever since and probably also before that. Now, the Greeks in and of themselves, though, were not doctrinal people. Their religion was practical and performative. Ritual worked if it produced desired effects: good harvests, healed bodies, successful expeditions. Gods existed insofar as you fed them properly, honored them at the right moment, and observed their festivals. That practical orientation explains many oddities. Because why does Artemis sometimes protect young women and sometimes kill them? Well, because ritual contexts change expectations. Rites of initiation, hunting seasons, and civic sacrifices all demand different relationships with the divine. The Greeks weren't trying to establish theological consistency. They were trying to keep social life calibrated to seasonal and political exegesis. Rituals, festivals, and local cults allowed for pluralism, because the same god could be a nurturing protector in one city and a terrifying boundary enforcer in another, depending on what social function needed reinforcement. And lastly, the Pantheon is a story about gendered power as much as it is about cosmic forces. Hera institutionalizes female power, marriage, birth, succession, while Athena models male-coded intellect that has been domesticated to serve the polis. Artemis offers a rare image of autonomous female power, but it is the autonomy of exclusion. Outside marriage, outside pity. Aphrodite demonstrates how sexual power undermines rational governance. These gods trade in gendered archetypes because the Greeks needed ways to talk about the distribution and limits of power within households and polities. Myth thus teach both aspiration and caution. Emulate Athena's prudence, but beware Aphrodite's disruption. Value Hera's order, but remember her cruelty if order becomes tyranny. Okay, if you step back now, the Olympians are an elegantly messy toolkit. They are cognitive shortcuts, institutional metaphors, political instruments, ritual anchors, gendered role models, and moral laboratories all at once. They do the work that a modern secular state, law courts, social sciences, and mass media now do, but in a polity without a unified bureaucratic apparatus. That multiplicity is why the gods are inconsistent. The system required flexibility more than doctrinal purity. The Greeks were, in other words, pragmatic myth-makers. And before we go, there's one final irony worth noting, because by populating the world with capricious, problematic divinities, the Greeks created models that encouraged precisely the virtues their society needed: prudence, negotiation, ritual, competence, and civic-minded cunning, because those were the skills that allowed you to live with gods who were useful, truthful, and indifferent all at once. They didn't imagine morally perfect gods, because morally perfect gods would have been useless. They imagined gods who reflected the world they actually lived in, and then taught generations how to live in that world without pretending it was fair. So, next time you're stuck in traffic or your life goes sideways, just remember, you're not unlucky. You're simply living in a world run by Greek gods, and they wouldn't have it any other way.